I gave him 5 hours. I ran away from the independent living house and I told him he had 5 hours, to kill her, and he told me that he couldn't do it because I was his mom.
This is one of the most egregious cases I've ever had. When you shoot and murder your mother, the woman that brought you into this world, and your sister, and you're going to spend the rest of your natural life in prison. Hopefully someday you'll think about that.
In a world where teenagers, once seen as the hope and future of a nation, their ruthless crimes have left families and entire towns in deep sorrow. From Stefon Roby's brutal crime to Darnell and Charles' horrifying act, these unsettling cases add another layer of complexity to highlight the challenges faced by those who are involved. Let's begin.
And that has nothing to do with the sentence.
Yes, it does have something to do with it.
Do you have anything you want to tell me in regards to this sentence?
Yes, I want to vote for mistrial because I don't...
Deny.
On March 6, 2013, a tragic event unfolded in Saginaw, Michigan, leaving the community heartbroken and stunned. A mother, Leigh King, and her 11-year-old daughter, Charlie King, were found brutally murdered in their home on Hess Street. The person accused of this heinous act is not a stranger, but Leigh's son and Charlie's older brother, Stefon Roby. It was a quiet, ordinary day when Stefon claimed someone had broken into their home and harmed his mother and sister while he was away visiting Delta College and getting a tattoo. The initial story painted a picture of a tragic home invasion, but as investigators dug deeper, the truth began to unravel. Charlie, Stefon's sister, had confided in a friend about a troubling incident just days before the tragedy. She had discovered a gun in her brother's room and, concerned for everyone's safety, handed it over to their mother. This decision, while brave, reportedly led to heated arguments in the family. According to the friend, Stefon even made concerning remarks during this time. As detectives pieced together the events, they uncovered a chilling sequence. They said Leigh, Stefon's mother, believed he should receive mental treatment. Tragically, Charlie has become a target to silence her as a witness.
His mother would still want him to receive the mental health treatment that he so adamantly rejected in the past.
What seemed like a random act of violence became a heartbreaking story of conflict within a family. The investigation shed light on the importance of addressing family concerns and seeking help during discord to prevent such devastating outcomes. In December 2014, Stefon made a bold choice to represent himself in court during his trial. Many questioned whether this decision was wise or fair. The prosecutors presented a strong case, arguing that Stefon's actions were carefully planned. They shared evidence of his earlier threats and the way the tragic events unfolded. Detectives testified about the chilling details, stating that Stefon returned to the scene to ensure no one survived. This testimony painted a clear picture of what they believed had happened. Despite Stefon's repeated claims of innocence, the evidence seemed to tell a different story. The jury listened carefully to all the arguments and evidence, but it didn't take them long to reach a decision. After just half an hour of deliberation, they found Stefon guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with 4 firearm charges.
Count number 4, felony firearm, first-degree premeditated murder, count 3, guilty, a felony firearm.
It was a tragic and sobering moment, bringing a sense of closure to a heartbreaking case. This story serves as a reminder of the importance of seeking peaceful solutions and the consequences of actions driven by anger or fear. However, this was not the end of the story. 10 years later, in June 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals overturned Roby's convictions. The appellate court ruled that errors during the trial had deprived him of a fair process. These included allowing the jury to hear incriminating statements made after Roby had been denied his right to an attorney, hearsay evidence, and references to his prior crimes. A retrial is now scheduled to begin in June 2025, giving Roby another chance to defend himself. When the verdict was announced, the judge announced a sentence of life in prison without the chance of parole.
Grandson Stefon Roby has been found guilty of being responsible for the deaths of 2 of the most vulnerable, non-threatening people in his life, his mother and his little sister.
The loss of Leigh and Charlie King is a painful reminder of how household conflicts can spiral into unimaginable tragedies. Leigh was described as the life of the party, a loving mother who cherished cooking and spending time with family. Charlie, a bright 6th grader, loved reading and playing with her dog, Polo. Their absence is deeply felt by all who knew them. While the legal system works to determine the fairness of Roby's trial, the emotional scars left by this family's destruction remain raw. It's a story that continues to haunt the Saginaw community and reminds us of the fragility of trust and family bonds. Stefon's betrayal of his family reveals a deep darkness, while the next case highlights how calculated actions took a mother's life and shattered the family's trust.
Check the safety of her. Has anybody seen her?
No, I've only seen a guy going in and out of there. I have not seen her in forever.
On a seemingly ordinary day in 2023, the life of Nicole Jones, a beloved mother from Sylvania Township, Ohio, was cut short in a horrifying act of betrayal. This is a story of family bonds broken by manipulation and greed, leaving a community in shock and a family in despair. Nicole Jones was known as a beacon of light to her loved ones. She brought joy to those around her, but her life took a tragic turn when her son, Jonathan Jones, and his 18-year-old girlfriend, Caitlin Coons, committed an unspeakable crime. Caitlin Coons had been living in the Jones household without Nicole Jones knowing. Tensions rose as Caitlin became frustrated with Nicole's presence in her and Jonathan's relationship. Prosecutors later revealed that Caitlin gave Jonathan an ultimatum. He had 5 hours to kill his mother, accusing her of interfering in their relationship. When Jonathan couldn't bring himself to do it, Caitlin extended the deadline by another 4 hours. In a devastating turn of events, Jonathan and Caitlin eventually carried out the unthinkable together. They attacked Nicole, striking her with a rock and strangling her, ending her life in a moment of cruelty and betrayal. But their actions didn't stop there. Desperate to hide their crime, the two bought a tarp and trash bags to wrap Nicole's body. They cleaned the scene and placed her remains in the trunk of her car. Shockingly, they even went out for dinner that night with Nicole's body still in the car. Afterward, they drove to a nearby apartment complex and dumped her body in a dumpster, leaving her family and community heartbroken and searching for answers.
Wrapping the body of Nicole Jones in tarps and placing her into the trunk of her own vehicle. The two of them headed to dinner with the body of Nicole Jones.
This horrific act left an unforgettable mark on those who loved Nicole and valued her light. Nicole's family was devastated by her loss. What made their pain even worse was the fact that her body was never found, denying them the chance to give her a proper farewell. Her brother, Robert Jones, spoke about the heartbreak they felt, saying, "Losing Nikki is an unimaginable betrayal. We are left without closure and haunted by thoughts of her final moments." After committing this terrible act, Caitlin Coons and Jonathan Jones fled to Mexico, hoping to escape justice. However, authorities tracked them down, and they were eventually arrested. On June 4, 2024, both Caitlin and Jonathan pleaded no contest to charges of aggravated murder and mistreatment of a corpse.
Pleas court, neither admitted guilt, but those no contest pleas means they accept the conviction.
During the trial, Judge Gary Cook sentenced them to life in prison, with the chance of parole after 25 years. Coons' remorseless face indicates she's not guilty of this act. Prosecutors described the case as one of the most horrific crimes they had encountered.
Teen charged with killing her boyfriend's mother in Sylvania Township.
Though justice was served, the loss of Nicole continues to weigh heavily on her family, who cherish her memory every day. Nicole's tragic death not only devastated her family, but also sent shockwaves through the community. A wrongful death lawsuit has been filed, seeking justice and accountability beyond the criminal trial. The loss of Nicole Jones is a stark reminder of how quickly love and trust can be shattered. Her family now carries the weight of unanswered questions and unimaginable grief, but they continue to honor her memory as a shining light in their lives. Coons' horrible act stunned everyone in the world. Next is the story of a teen who kills a man on a bicycle in Las Vegas.
Lying, I'm not being dramatic. You think this juvenile gonna do something? I'll be out in like 30 days. What? You might be out of juvie in 30 days and moved over to an adult jail.
In 2023, a shocking and disturbing crime spree unfolded in Las Vegas involving two young teens, Jesus Ayala, 19, and Jameer Keys, 17. The teens were accused of intentionally running over a retired police chief, Andreas Probst, in a violent and laugh-filled crime spree. The brutal act left the community in shock as Probst, a beloved 64-year-old man, was hit by the stolen vehicle while riding his bike. Ayala and Keys had been causing chaos that morning, running wild and committing a series of unfortunate events. The trouble began when they hit Probst with their car, leaving him seriously injured. But their actions didn't stop there. They went on to steal several cars and crash them, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. As law enforcement began to piece together what happened, they soon realized Ayala had been struggling with significant mental health issues. This revelation led to questions about whether Ayala was mentally capable of standing trial for the harm he had caused. Was he aware of his actions and able to understand the consequences of what he had done? The investigation into his mental state became a key focus, as everyone tried to determine how to handle the case in a fair and just manner.
Is this a clear-cut case since you have video?
A picture tells 1,000 words.
The case raised important questions about justice, responsibility, and the need for proper support for those facing mental health challenges. In September 2023, Ayala's legal team raised concerns about his ability to stand trial. questioning whether he was mentally fit to face the charges. The courts took these concerns seriously and decided that Ayala should be sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment in hopes of restoring his competency. Medical professionals had observed that Ayala might be suffering from severe brain damage, and his behavior had shown signs of instability. Even though the crime was serious, Ayala's defense team argued that his mental health played a significant role in the actions he had taken. They believed his mental state might have influenced the decisions he made during that chaotic morning. The court now faced the difficult task of balancing justice with understanding Ayala's mental health struggles.
To the media, I don't know if I need a press pass to get discovery, but I would certainly like to get some discovery in this case before the media gets it.
While the case was ongoing, it highlighted an important conversation about the role of mental health in legal matters and how individuals with mental health issues should be treated fairly within the justice system. Ayala was sent to Lakes Crossing Center, a psychiatric facility, to receive the necessary treatment. The charges against him remained suspended while his mental health was evaluated. Meanwhile, Ayala faced further charges for robbery, conspiracy, and grand larceny related to the spree. As the legal process continued, Ayala's fate was uncertain, with many questioning whether his mental state would affect his punishment. Jesus Ayala was sentenced to 22 years in prison, while Jameer Keys, who was also involved, received a sentence of 18 years in prison for the murder and related charges. But still, both show no remorse. In fact, both the teens laughed at the time of the sentence.
I'm Kirsten Joyce. 2 teens in court accused of killing a cyclist. The 8 News Now investigators first to bring you additional evidence from the alleged crime spree.
The case left the community and Prope's family devastated. The thought of a retired police chief being deliberately struck by a car in a senseless attack was heart-wrenching. While the legal system worked to determine Ayala's competency, there was a sense of frustration, with many believing that regardless of his mental health, the severity of his crime should not be overlooked.
Flight risk or danger to the community, okay? I believe they're potentially both. They have certainly proved that they are dangerous.
As Ayala and Keys showed no remorse during their trial, next is the story of how a brutal murder separates the father from his children on Christmas Eve.
It's just absolutely horrible that a man would be sitting at a store waiting to go celebrate Christmas with his kids.
On Christmas Eve, tragedy struck in Detroit. Anthony Tolson, a talented musician known for his work with big names like Neo, was carjacked and murdered outside a grocery store on Gratiot Avenue. He was on his way home from church where he had been delivering Christmas gifts to his children. The heartless crime was committed by a group of 3 men who targeted Tolson for the rims on his car. The loss of Anthony Tolson sent shockwaves through the community, leaving his family devastated, especially his mother, Allison Tolson. The crime wasn't just about a car being stolen, it was about the senseless loss of a life over something so meaningless. Anthony Tolson had worked hard to escape the struggles of Detroit, becoming a successful musician who had toured with some of the biggest names in the industry. He was a symbol of hope for many, someone who made it out of the hardships of the city and found a way to live his dreams. But for the 3 men involved, Devin Williams, Darnell Young, and Charles Cox, Anthony's life meant nothing to them. They didn't care that he was a father, a talented musician, or someone who worked hard to make a better life for himself. They only saw him as a target for a quick gain, and they took that chance without hesitation. Anthony's life was taken over by something as small as the rims on his car, and it was a loss that no one should ever have to endure. A man who had so much potential was gone, leaving behind a family that loved him and children who would grow up without their father. In the end, it wasn't just a crime, it was a tragedy that could have been avoided, but wasn't.
More to do, and you and your friends interrupted that.
At the sentencing, the deep grief of Anthony Tolson's mother became clear for all to see. With tears in her eyes, she said that she no longer wanted to hear any apologies from him. Her son, Anthony, was gone, and the gifts he had planned to give his children would never be opened.
Please do not say to me or my family or my friends that you are sorry, because I don't want to hear it.
The judge had the difficult task of handing down the sentence. Williams was sentenced to 13 to 40 years in prison for his role in the crime. His co-defendants, Darnell Young and Charles Cox, faced similar consequences. Darnell Young was sentenced to 33 to 60 years in prison, with Cox receiving a life sentence without the chance for parole. Both Cox and Young didn't show remorse for their actions.
Charles Cox and Darnell Young will remain jailed without bond. Their next court appearance scheduled for February 8th.
The weight of the verdict didn't bring Anthony back, but it served as a reminder that actions have consequences, no matter how small the crime seems. For Tolson's family, the road to healing was just beginning, and the loss would forever be felt in their heart. Even though justice was served, the pain for the Tolson family never truly went away. Anthony Tolson's life was taken over by something as insignificant as a car, leaving behind 3 young children who would grow up without their father's love and guidance. They would never get to hear his voice or feel the warmth of his presence on special occasions.
And did you hear the charges and the penalty that you could receive?
Yes, ma'am. The loss was felt not only by his family, but by the entire community. Anthony had risen above the difficult circumstances of his upbringing in Detroit. He was proof that hard work and determination could lead to success. He had made it out, becoming a respected musician, and had dreams of a bright future. But in an instant, his life was stolen, leaving behind only memories and the hope that his story would inspire others to rise above their struggles. The pain of his loss echoed in the hearts of everyone who knew him. His family would forever carry the weight of his absence, and the community would continue to mourn a life taken too soon. She lost not only her son, but the presence of a father in the lives of her grandchildren. The anger, sorrow, and helplessness in her voice revealed the deep impact this crime had on her and her family. The loss was immeasurable, and while the sentencing of the three men might have offered some sense of justice, nothing could replace what was taken from them.
The ache and pain of not seeing my son, not talking to my son, is still there.
Up next, Vincent Parker's shocking crime turned a quiet neighborhood upside down, revealing the terrifying consequences of a sudden, violent outburst that no one saw coming.
Yes, he owned a dog, and he loved that dog to death. I also have a 3-year-old sister, and I would let him watch her when I was busy doing something else.
Oof.
He is very sad that something like this would happen. He is trying to figure out himself why he's done it. He's not sure.
On December 19, 2013, in Norfolk, Virginia, 16-year-old Vincent Parker shocked an entire community with a brutal act of violence inside his family's modest home. Vincent, described by his classmates and teachers as polite and well-behaved, carried out a crime so shocking that even seasoned investigators struggled to understand the depths of his rage. By the end of that day, both of Vincent's parents, Carol and Wayne Parker, were dead. But the reason behind this unimaginable betrayal wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't about revenge over years of abuse or neglect. According to Vincent, the motive was something almost trivial. He was angry because his parents had taken away his iPod.
A Norfolk teen will spend at least a quarter of a century in prison for stabbing his own parents to death. Police say Vincent Parker was just 16 at the time of the alleged crime. Officers found Wayne and Carol Parker dead in their home on Bland Street in December.
The Parkers were a tight-knit, church-going family. Carol, 57, was known for her kind nature and strict parenting style, while Wayne, 55, worked tirelessly to support his family. Together, they had raised Vincent to value discipline, education, and responsibility.
Vincent Parker is shown at a young age with his parents, Carol and Wayne. The picture relatives say of what they thought was a happy family. That was until last December when Vincent, a 16-year-old honor student, brutally beat and stabbed his parents to death.
To those who knew him, Vincent appeared to be a model son. He excelled in school, had a clean record, and was often described as respectful and quiet. But behind the scenes, tensions were building. Vincent's parents had grown increasingly strict, especially when it came to his use of electronics. They felt that devices like his iPod and phone were distracting him from schoolwork and family responsibilities. In the days leading up to the crime, Vincent's parents had punished him for poor behavior by taking away his iPod. This seemingly small action unleashed a growing frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. While his parents believed they were teaching him a lesson, Vincent saw their discipline as controlling and unfair. His anger reached a boiling point, and on that December day, he made a horrifying decision to take revenge.
He is a smart young man. Yeah, he is smart in school. Don't know what happened because this occurred.
That afternoon, Vincent left school early and returned to his family home. His mother, Carol, was the first to face his wrath. As she stood in the upstairs bathroom, Vincent sprayed her with pepper spray, blinding and disorienting her. He then grabbed a wooden bat and struck her repeatedly, the blows so violent that she collapsed on the bathroom floor. But Vincent wasn't done. He picked up a knife and stabbed her in the chest multiple times, leaving her lifeless body in a pool of blood. Minutes later, Wayne Parker came home from work. As he entered the house, Vincent ambushed him. Armed with a crowbar, Vincent struck his father repeatedly and then stabbed him. Despite his critical injuries, Wayne managed to stumble out of the house and call 911, gasping for help.
Police recovered several knives, a baseball bat, and a crowbar. Court papers show the teen told police afterwards he, quote, just got mad and went off. I just remember getting mad. It's all from my dad.
When first responders arrived, they found Wayne bleeding heavily outside the house. He was rushed to the hospital but tragically died shortly after. Inside, police discovered Carol's lifeless body in the bathroom. Blood splattered the walls, floors, and furniture, a chilling testament to the violence that had occurred.
It was premeditated. He had no mercy. Vincent Parker. He despised his parents.
He and his family hope that one day Parker will understand how many lives he's affected.
Vincent didn't attempt to flee the scene. Instead, he calmly admitted to the crime, telling police what he had done and why. His confession left everyone in disbelief.
Stephanie, Vincent Parker is being tried as an adult. He was in shackles and handcuffs in court and had no real emotion when he pleaded guilty. Alan Taylor of Elizabeth City leaves court after his 16-year-old grandson Vincent Parker pleaded guilty to killing Taylor's daughter Carol and his son-in-law Wayne.
Vincent's reasoning behind the murder sent shockwaves through the courtroom. He told police that he was angry because his parents had taken away his iPod and punished him over minor disagreements. Prosecutors painted Vincent as cold and calculating, describing how he meticulously planned the attack on his mother and father. Vincent pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for both killings. During his sentencing, he expressed remorse for his actions, but the damage was already done. In 2014, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison, a punishment that divided opinions. Some believed the sentence was fair, given the horrific nature of the crime, while others questioned whether a teenager could fully comprehend the weight of such actions.
I feel that he killed his parents because he wanted to have his own lifestyle. He wanted to be able to do what he wanted to do.
An uncle, overcome with emotion after testifying, lunged at the teen, and at that point deputies restrained him and Parker was whisked from the courtroom unharmed.
The courtroom was filled with grief and disbelief as the Parkers' friends and family struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. Carol and Wayne were remembered as loving, hardworking parents who had done everything they could to give Vincent a good life. The fact that their son had turned against them in such a violent way was almost too much to bear.
I don't know what happened myself. I'm sure he can't remember what happened. So we ask God to pray for him.
Vincent himself appeared remorseful in court, apologizing for his actions and expressing regret for the pain he had caused. But for those who knew the Parkers, the loss of two kind-hearted people in such a senseless act left a scar that could never heal.
I know sorry may not be enough to justify what I did, but I'm sorry for what I did to both you and your dad. You and Dad. I would give my life for you two to be alive again. You and Dad were and still are the best mom and dad in the world. Mom, I want to thank you for bringing me into this world. Well, I'll see you soon. Happy Mother's Day to the best mother in the world. I miss you and Dad so much.
To this day, the case serves as a chilling reminder of how unchecked anger and resentment can spiral into devastating violence, leaving behind a trail of heartbreak and unanswered questions. The next case takes us to Canada, where a young woman's calculated lies and cold manipulation led to a horrifying betrayal.
The real-life horror story that happened inside the Pan family's home shattered the serenity of their normally quiet, upscale neighborhood.
On a chilly November night in 2010, a quiet neighborhood in Markham, Ontario was shattered by a violent home invasion. For Jennifer Pan, it should have been the most terrifying night of her life. Masked intruders burst into her family's home, tied her up, and shot her parents in cold blood before fleeing into the darkness. But when investigators began to untangle the web of events, the horrifying truth surfaced. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was a meticulously planned attack, and the mastermind behind it was Jennifer herself.
The Pans were the epitome of an immigrant success story. Han Pan and his wife Bic were Vietnamese boat people who escaped to find a better life.
Jennifer Pan's parents, Bic Ha and Han Pan, had always pushed their children to succeed. As Vietnamese immigrants, they had built a life in Canada through hard work and determination, and they expected the same from Jennifer. They monitored her grades, chose her extracurriculars, and even controlled who she could be friends with. For Jennifer, the pressure was relentless. She was expected to become a straight-A student, a concert pianist, and a shining example of success.
And daughter Jennifer was an Olympic-caliber figure skater, an award-winning pianist, and a straight-A student.
His daughter, he wanted to be a doctor, eventually changing that to a pharmacist because he said that she didn't have the stomach for it.
But by her late teens, Jennifer's grades were slipping. Instead of admitting her struggles to her parents, she created an elaborate web of lies. She forged report cards, fabricated university acceptance letters, and even pretended to have a job at a prestigious hospital. To her parents, Jennifer was living the life they had dreamed for her. But in reality, she was struggling to keep up the facade.
He blamed a lot of her behavior on what's known in popular culture as tiger parenting.
Tiger parenting is common in Asian culture. It's described as tough love, some say bordering on tyranny.
She was caught in multiple lies. She was caught out living with him. She was caught out not attending university. She was eventually locked in her home.
Her parents basically put her on lockdown when they figured out what she was up to.
Yes.
The conflict between Jennifer and her parents intensified when they discovered she was secretly dating a man they disapproved of, Daniel Wong. They forbade her from seeing him, going as far as taking away her phone and restricting her freedom. Trapped in a world of her own lies and desperate to be with Daniel, Jennifer made a chilling decision. If her parents wouldn't let her live the life she wanted, she would make sure they were no longer a part of it.
You could see three shadowy figures come into the house together.
What did they say when they walked in?
They asked for money.
Over the course of several months, Jennifer began orchestrating a plan with Daniel and his friends to have her parents killed. On the night of November 8, 2010, the plan was put into motion. At around 10 p.m., Jennifer unlocked the front door of her family home, allowing 3 masked men to enter. She staged the scene to make it look like a robbery, tying herself to a banister with a scarf to appear as though she was a victim.
Some people broke into our house and they showed us all his money.
The men made their way upstairs, where they found Bick and Han in their bedroom. After ransacking the house for valuables to sell the illusion of a break-in, the men forced Jennifer's parents down to the basement. There, Han was shot twice, but miraculously he survived. Bick, however, was shot and killed, her lifeless body left on the cold concrete floor.
Moments later, that grainy security video shows the killers taking off. For some reason, they spared Jennifer's life, and she dials 911.
Jennifer, still pretending to be a victim, called 911, speaking calmly but with just enough emotion to sell the story. She told the operator about the robbery and how the men had tied her up before attacking her parents. But cracks in her story began to show almost immediately.
What's your name?
My name is Jennifer.
Someone just broke in?
Someone broke in and I heard shots like pops. I don't know what's happening. I'm tied upstairs.
Does it sound like gunshots?
I don't know what a gunshot sounds like. I just heard a pop.
The investigation into the Pan family home invasion didn't take long to unravel Jennifer's lies. Han, who survived the attack, provided a crucial piece of evidence. He recalled seeing Jennifer speaking calmly to one of the intruders, an interaction that didn't match her story of being a helpless victim.
When they get to the house, they find Jennifer tied up exactly the way she described. That raises more than a few eyebrows.
She's telling the 911 operator that she is tied to the banister, but she's also making the call on her cell phone.
Detectives also began to notice inconsistencies in Jennifer's account of the night. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood showed no sign of the intruders, and her demeanor during police interviews raised red flags. Under pressure, Jennifer eventually confessed, revealing that she had been the mastermind behind the attack.
So $10,000, 3 guys will come in, kill the parents, make it look like a home invasion.
Yeah, and that was the initial agreement.
All you have to do is tell me that you were involved, right? You know it, we know it, it's plain as day. I'm 100% correct here.
In 2014, Jennifer Pan was convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years.
A judge later sentenced Jennifer and the 3 others to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years.
At first, she had no reaction, but as the news sunk in, she broke down.
Jennifer, Daniel, and 2 of the gunmen are sentenced to life in prison. The 3rd gunman pleads guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. Jennifer also receives a non-communication order, meaning she can never speak to anyone in her family again.
The courtroom during Jennifer Pan's trial was a mix of shock, grief, and anger. Han Pan, still recovering from his injuries, testified against his own daughter, his voice trembling as he recounted the betrayal. Friends and family struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, obedient girl they thought they knew with the chilling reality of her actions. Prosecutors painted Jennifer as manipulative and cold, willing to destroy her family to live the life she wanted. But the defense argued that years of parental pressure had created a deep sense of resentment and desperation. For the Pan family, however, the damage was irreparable. Bick Ha was gone, and the father who had once loved Jennifer unconditionally now saw her as a stranger. Jennifer's actions left scars that would never heal, not just on her family, but on the entire community. Even years later, the case remains a chilling reminder of how far someone can go when pushed to the brink. The next case takes us to Idaho, where a 16-year-old girl's obsession with her boyfriend led her to commit a crime so shocking it tore her family apart.
And she came running out bawling and says, "They think I did it."
A teenage girl stands trial for murder, while her family watches and wonders. No one could have imagined what would happen after they tried to end the relationship. Diane and Alan were murdered.
In the early morning hours of September 2nd, 2003, a quiet home in Bellevue, Idaho became the site of an unthinkable crime. Alan and Diane Johnson, known for their kindness and strong family ties, were brutally murdered in their own house. But this wasn't the work of an unknown intruder. The truth behind the murders shocked the entire town. It wasn't a stranger who took their lives. It was their own 16-year-old daughter, Sarah Marie Johnson. What could drive a teenager to commit such a horrific act? As investigators dug deeper into Sarah's life, they uncovered a story of love, rebellion, and betrayal that left a community forever scarred.
She was very vivacious, very curious, very loving, very loyal. You couldn't have a better friend than Diana.
I always looked up to Alan and copied him, and he was always just a really great, honest, straightforward guy.
To outsiders, the Johnson family seemed like the picture of stability. Alan was a hard-working ranch manager, and Diane was a loving homemaker who was deeply involved in her church. But beneath the surface, there was tension brewing.
Parents know to expect problems when their kids become teenagers. And Diane and Alan Johnson's 16-year-old daughter, Sarah, have presented them with a very big problem. A boyfriend they thought was wrong for her.
At the heart of the conflict was Sarah's relationship with Bruno Santos, a 19-year-old man her parents strongly disapproved of. Alan and Diane believed he was a bad influence on their daughter, not only because of his age, but also due to his troubled past. They forbade Sarah from seeing him, taking her phone away and grounding her in an effort to keep them apart.
He was a high school dropout and was selling drugs, and she came from this really nice family. It just didn't seem like it was right.
But Sarah was deeply infatuated with Bruno. To her, their relationship was everything, and her parents' attempts to end it felt like an attack on her freedom. The more they tried to control her, the more resentment grew. Sarah began to see her parents not as protectors, but as obstacles standing in the way of her happiness.
I know she had problems with my mom. One day it'd be fine, and then as fast as you could snap your finger, all hell would raise loose, and there'd be yelling and screaming.
By the summer of 2003, Sarah's frustration had turned into something darker. She started confiding in friends about how much she hated her parents and even hinted that she wanted them gone. At first, her words seemed like empty teenage rebellion, but they were far more than that. Sarah wasn't just angry, she was planning.
911, what is your emergency? 2 gunshots.
Alan and Diane Johnson were brutally executed in their home.
On the morning of September 2nd, 2003, Sarah put her plan into motion. While her parents slept peacefully in their home, Sarah retrieved her father's .264 caliber rifle, which she had hidden the night before. At around 6:20 a.m., she walked into her parents' bedroom and shot her mother Diane as she lay in bed. Alan woke up to the sound of the gunshot, only to be confronted by Sarah in the hallway. Before he could react, Sarah fired again, killing him instantly. The house was eerily silent as Sarah stood there, the rifle still in her hands. But instead of calling for help or fleeing, she calmly began staging the scene. She dragged her mother's body out of the bedroom and covered it with a blanket. Then she left the rifle outside near their guest house, trying to make it look like an intruder had committed the crime.
Diane shot in the head while sleeping. Alan hit in the chest while in the shower. Their daughter Sarah, sounding terrified, says she was alone in her bedroom when it all happened.
Once everything was in place, Sarah ran to a neighbor's house, pretending to be hysterical. She told them she had just come home to find her parents murdered. The neighbors immediately called the police, who arrived on the scene within minutes.
Panicked and hysterical, fled to a neighbor's, where they called police.
There have been 2 gunshots in the bedroom.
So you get here.
At first, Sarah's act seemed convincing. She played the role of the grieving daughter well, crying and clinging to her story of a mysterious intruder. But as investigators examined the evidence, her story began to fall apart.
Right out here on the street.
Inside that garbage can, bullets from the Winchester rifle, a left-handed leather glove, and a right-handed latex glove, all containing someone's DNA.
Detectives quickly noticed inconsistencies in Sarah's version of events. The rifle, which had been left outside, was too clean to have been handled by an intruder in a panic. There were no signs of forced entry, and the timeline Sarah provided didn't add up. As they dug deeper, police uncovered her motive. Sarah's parents had been planning to send her away to live with relatives to keep her away from Bruno Santos. To Sarah, this was the ultimate betrayal, and she decided that the only way to stay with Bruno was to eliminate the people standing in her way.
What were you feeling for your sister who just went through this?
If this rang true, if this is what happened, that's just horrible. That would be sad to be in a house when that happened.
Poor Sarah.
Yeah.
16 years old.
Of course.
At this point, you're all in mourning and...
When confronted with the evidence, Sarah eventually confessed. Her trial began in 2005, and the details of the crime horrified the courtroom. Prosecutors argued that Sarah's actions were cold and calculated, while her defense team claimed she had acted out of desperation and emotional instability.
There is something going on here. I mean, most 16-year-olds would be hiding. They would not want to sit there on the fence and watch their parents come out in body bags. No way.
After weeks of testimony, the jury found Sarah guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole, a sentence that sparked debate over whether a teenager should face such a harsh punishment.
Guilty on both counts of first-degree murder.
That was probably one of the single hardest points.
It's undescribable. It really is, the heartache and the sorrow.
At first, it's just, you can't believe it. It's something that's so...
Your sisters say that she hated your mother.
Constantly.
You testified that Sarah hated your mother, that she actually said this.
Yes.
She actually,
several times, yes.
You heard her say that?
Uh-huh.
The emotional toll of Sarah's crime was immeasurable. Alan and Diane's family and friends filled the courtroom, their grief visible as they listened to the details of the murders. Many described Sarah as a sweet and caring girl before she met Bruno Santos, struggling to understand how she could have committed such a horrific act.
Showing a guilty mind.
While her anguished relatives looked on, prosecutors presented grim details of the killing and the evidence.
Sarah was crying, and her defense team had probably told her to hope for the best but expect the worst, and I think that's what she was doing.
Sarah herself showed little emotion during the trial, her face remaining calm even as her fate was sealed. But for the people of Bellevue, the crime left a deep scar. The Johnsons had been pillars of their small community, and their loss was felt by everyone who knew them. To this day, Sarah's case remains one of the most shocking examples of a child turning against their own parents. It's a chilling reminder of how love, obsession, and rebellion can combine to create devastating consequences. The next case takes us to Texas, where a 16-year-old boy turned his family's peaceful home into the scene of a shocking tragedy.
Now to another big story. A day after A.J. Armstrong was found guilty of murdering his parents, and his family members say they are left devastated and in disbelief.
The murders of Antonio Sr. and Dawn Armstrong in their own home in 2016 as they slept is an absolute tragedy. Family members say they now have the added pain of a jury finding their son, Antonio Armstrong Jr., guilty of shooting his parents to death when he was 16 years old.
In the early hours of July 29, 2016, the quiet suburban home of Antonio and Dawn Armstrong in Houston, Texas was shattered by gunfire. The couple, known for their devotion to family and faith, were brutally murdered as they slept in their bedroom. Their teenage son, A.J. Armstrong, made the chilling 911 call, claiming someone had broken into their home. But as investigators dug deeper, they found no signs of forced entry. What they uncovered instead was a tangled web of evidence pointing to a shocking truth. The prime suspect was their own 16-year-old son.
Antonio and Dawn Armstrong were the kind of couple other couples envied. They had it all: a tight-knit family, 3 accomplished children, leaders in their church, savvy entrepreneurs, owners of a small chain of gyms.
Antonio and Dawn Armstrong were pillars of their community. Antonio, a former NFL player turned businessman, and Dawn, a devoted mother and fitness enthusiast, were admired for their strong Christian values and parenting. They poured their love and energy into raising their 3 children, especially their youngest, Antonio Armstrong Jr., better known as AJ. To the outside world, the Armstrong family seemed perfect, but behind closed doors, tensions between AJ and his parents had been growing. Antonio and Dawn were known to enforce strict rules, often clashing with their teenage son over his behavior, grades, and the company he kept. AJ had reportedly been struggling in school and had been disciplined for sneaking out and partying late at night.
AJ didn't react as months of private text messages to his mom and dad were shown and read to a jury. Strangers who will ultimately decide, was AJ just a normal kid acting out, or a 16-year-old killer sick of taking heat from his parents?
These disagreements escalated in the months leading up to the murders. According to testimony later presented in court, AJ felt suffocated by his parents' rules and was harboring resentment towards them. That resentment came to a head on a fateful summer night when AJ made a decision that would tear his family apart forever.
Remember in the 911 he says, I heard 2 gunshots.
Any medical attention needed?
I heard gunshots. I don't really know. I went down the stairs, saw a crack in my parents' door.
At 1:40 a.m. on July 29, 2016, police received a frantic 911 call from AJ, claiming he had heard gunshots and that someone had broken into the family's home. Officers arrived to find Antonio Armstrong Sr. and Dawn Armstrong lying in their bed, both shot in the head. Dawn was pronounced dead at the scene, while Antonio Sr. was rushed to the hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries hours later.
I'd say like 6 feet, maybe, somewhere around there. I couldn't give you like an age range. I didn't really get to see his face or anything like that.
So for him to go to that, to all of a sudden, oh, there was a masked man in my house and I needed to go get my sister, to me and John, I think too, was one of the biggest inconsistencies.
Investigators immediately noticed inconsistencies in AJ's story. There were no signs of forced entry or robbery. Instead, they found a .22 caliber pistol, believed to be the murder weapon, in AJ's bedroom. Nearby, they discovered a note that read, "I've been watching you." AJ claimed the note was left by the intruder, but police found no evidence to support his claims.
There was somebody else in the house that night, and to know that this is something I'm being accused of just makes everything so much worse.
Police say there were no signs of a break-in.
Is his father's blood on his clothes when, according to the defendant, he never went in and checked on them?
During questioning, AJ's behavior raised suspicions. He remained calm and collected, offering explanations that didn't align with the evidence. Investigators pieced together a timeline that painted a chilling picture. AJ had allegedly waited until his parents were asleep, retrieved the gun from his father's belongings, and shot them at close range. He then staged the scene to look like a break-in, placing the note and calling 911 to divert suspicion.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Antonio Armstrong Jr., guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
AJ was charged with capital murder just days after the killings. His trial became one of the most closely watched cases in Houston, drawing intense media attention and dividing public opinion.
Now, we want to remind you that it took 3 trials for a jury to convict Armstrong. He's now serving a life sentence for the 2016 murders of his mother and father at their home in Bel Air.
The prosecution argued that AJ's motive stemmed from resentment and anger towards his parents, particularly his father, who had disciplined him harshly for his behavior. They presented evidence that tied AJ to the murder weapon and pointed out inconsistencies in his alibi.
Deserves far more than to have his future determined based on faulty, unreliable.
The defense, however, painted a different picture. They argued that AJ was a loving son who had been traumatized by the deaths of his parents. They claimed the investigation was flawed, pointing to issues with the handling of DNA evidence and suggesting the possibility of another suspect.
AJ has now been sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years.
God will find a way. I'm convinced of that.
After years of delays and multiple trials, AJ was convicted of capital murder in 2023. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. The case continued to spark controversy, with AJ's legal team filing appeals based on alleged mishandling of evidence.
At the core of this case, when you look past the claims and evidence and opinions, are 3 heartbroken parents.
They were amazing. They were 2 amazing people.
The courtroom was filled with heartbreak during AJ's sentencing. Friends and family of Antonio and Dawn described the immense pain of losing 2 beloved members of their community. Antonio Sr. had been a mentor to many, using his NFL experience to inspire youth, while Dawn was remembered as a kind and devoted mother who always put her family first. AJ maintained his innocence throughout the trial, a stance that divided the community. Some believed he was a misunderstood teen who had been wrongfully accused, while others saw the evidence as irrefutable.
I have to ask you just one time, did you kill your parents?
No. Never. Never.
What do you want to say to them?
I mean, for me, it's as simple as I didn't do it.
For the Armstrong family, the tragedy left a void that can never be filled. The case remains a haunting reminder of how quickly family bonds can unravel, leaving behind devastation and unanswered questions. The next case takes us to Pennsylvania, where a family's peaceful farmhouse became the site of a horrifying crime.
A civil rights lawsuit has been filed against the Pennsylvania State Police over the arrest and murder conviction of 11-year-old Jordan Brown. Brown was convicted of shooting and killing his father's pregnant fiancée.
Child killer accused of a shocking crime at the age of 11.
It was the brutal crime and shocking arrest that garnered national headlines.
On a cold February morning in 2009, in the small rural town of Wampum, Pennsylvania, an unthinkable tragedy unfolded that would spark over a decade of legal battles, shattered lives, and unanswered questions. Inside a farmhouse, 11-year-old Jordan Brown was accused of committing an act so chilling, it shocked not only his family, but an entire nation.
He was Kenzie's fiancé, the father of her expectant child. And one more thing, Brown is also the father of the suspected killer, 12-year-old Jordan Brown.
His father's pregnant fiancée, 26-year-old Kenzie Hoke, was found shot in her bed. Her unborn child tragically lost as well. And as investigators pieced together the events of that morning, their attention turned to Jordan, the young boy who many believed had no capacity for such violence. But what truly happened that day? And how did an accusation turn into one of the most controversial legal sagas in recent history?
What do you see in this mugshot?
I see somebody who just committed a murder. That's why there's a mugshot.
with his son facing life without the possibility of parole if
The morning of February 20th, 2009 started like any other. Kenzie Hauk, who was 8 months pregnant, was home with her 2 daughters, Janessa 7 and Adeline 4, while Jordan prepared for school. Jordan, the son of Kenzie's fiance, Chris Brown, had recently moved into the farmhouse with his father.
This is Jordan Brown when he was still a typical 5th grader, quarterback of the Pee Wee football team, the Warriors, coached by his father Chris, a single dad.
But beneath the surface, tensions were quietly building. Kenzie's family later claimed that Jordan harbored resentment towards Kenzie and her pregnancy, believing that the arrival of a new baby would push him out of his father's attention.
And a new sibling was on the way. Chris and Kenzie were eagerly awaiting a baby together, a boy they had already named Christopher.
She was thrilled.
As the morning routine unfolded, tragedy struck. Kenzie's 7-year-old daughter, Janessa, found her mother lying unresponsive in her bedroom. Kenzie had been shot in the back of the head at close range with a shotgun. The unborn baby, just weeks away from being born, did not survive.
9 a.m., tree trimmers arrived to work around the house. A short time later, a tree trimmer sees Adeline in the doorway, sobbing. She tells him her mother is dead.
When police arrived, they began their investigation. Their focus quickly shifted to Jordan when they discovered that his youth-sized 20-gauge shotgun, a Christmas gift from his father, had been recently fired. Investigators believed Jordan had taken the weapon, shot Kenzie as she slept, and then boarded the school bus as if nothing had happened. Jordan, however, denied any involvement in the crime, insisting he had gone straight to school that morning and had nothing to do with what had happened.
February 2009, 26-year-old Kenzie Hauk found dead in her rural Pennsylvania farmhouse. She was 8.5 months pregnant. The suspect, her 11-year-old soon-to-be stepson, Jordan Brown.
Within hours, Jordan was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for Kenzie and 1 for her unborn baby. The case immediately made headlines, with Jordan being labeled as one of the youngest individuals in the U.S. ever to face such serious charges.
Less than 24 hours later, state police arrested Jordan, accusing him of using his shotgun, a hunting gift from his dad, to fire 1 fatal bullet to the back of her head.
Prosecutors argued that Jordan's motive stemmed from jealousy and anger towards Kenzie and her unborn child. They claimed that Jordan had walked into Kenzie's bedroom, fired the fatal shot, and calmly continued his morning routine to avoid suspicion.
3 years after his arrest, a now 14-year-old Jordan is found guilty in juvenile court of double homicide.
Obviously, the police believe that you killed Kenzie. Did you kill Kenzie?
No.
But the defense painted a starkly different picture. They argued that the evidence against Jordan was purely circumstantial and riddled with inconsistencies. There were no witnesses to the crime, no physical evidence tying Jordan to the shooting, and no blood or gunpowder residue on his clothing. As the trial proceeded, it became clear that investigators had based much of their case on the testimony of Janessa, Kenzie's 7-year-old daughter. Janessa claimed she heard a loud boom before seeing Jordan leave Kenzie's room that morning. However, the reliability of her statement was called into question due to her young age and potential influence from adults around her.
I was crying in the picture. I was crying that whole night. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know where I was at, like what was going on or anything.
Did you understand what you stood accused of?
No, I didn't understand.
Despite these uncertainties, Jordan was found guilty in 2012 by a juvenile court judge, a decision that left many questioning the fairness of the investigation and the trial.
The last court proceeding on this matter was actually just this past Friday. The judge now has 20 days to determine whether or not the young boy will be tried as an adult. 2 families now awaiting a decision in a case that has stunned a small town in Pennsylvania.
Jordan spent years in a juvenile detention center, growing from a boy into a young man while maintaining his innocence. In 2018, nearly a decade after the crime, Jordan's conviction was overturned by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The court ruled that the evidence presented during his trial was insufficient to support the guilty verdict, effectively exonerating him.
Brown was convicted of shooting and killing his father's pregnant fiancée. But the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out the conviction, saying there was insufficient evidence.
Jordan was finally free, but the damage had been done. He had lost his childhood, spending crucial developmental years behind bars for a crime he insisted he didn't commit.
Pennsylvania Supreme Court sides with Jordan, writing that the prosecution had presented insufficient evidence. Jordan's conviction overturned.
Everything's gone. That made me happy, and then the truth finally got out.
In the years since his release, Jordan has worked to rebuild his life, but the stigma of the case continues to follow him. He has filed a civil lawsuit against the police and prosecutors involved in his arrest, alleging that their rushed investigation and flawed evidence robbed him of his youth.
No, I'm not angry. I mean, I think the whole, like, what happened and the way it happened is BS, but I'm not
Can I say that?
Now 21, Jordan says he's determined to focus on brighter days ahead.
We're just here to support Jordan because we know he's innocent. We believe in him, and we'd like to get through this stage so that they can find the real killer and actually give some justice to baby Christopher and Kenzie.
The courtroom reactions throughout Jordan's trials and appeals were a mix of heartbreak and outrage. Kenzie's family remained steadfast in their belief that Jordan was responsible, while Jordan's father, Chris Brown, stood by his son's innocence from the very beginning.
The victim's mom and dad, Deb and Jack Hogue, are troubled by what they see inside and outside the courtroom.
There's absolutely no emotion on their side. I don't know.
For many, the case of Jordan Brown raised critical questions about the justice system. Should an 11-year-old ever have been charged with first-degree murder based on circumstantial evidence? Did the rush to solve Kenzie's murder lead to an innocent child being wrongly accused? To this day, the case remains one of the most controversial in recent history, serving as a stark reminder of the complexities of justice when children are at the center of tragedy. The stories of these teen killers are marked by tragedy, leaving scars that won't easily heal. Their cold calculations, manipulations, and reckless violence reflect the unimaginable depth of their crimes. From cocky behaviors to chilling reactions in court, they stun the world. The next video on screen takes you deeper into more chilling cases that stun the world. Keep watching.